agenda is set. Hello, everyone. I'm Brent Goff in Berlin. What does a U.S. president do when politics and the public seem to be turning against him? Well, he takes a lesson from history and he goes to Berlin. Today on the show, Europe and the world reading Obama. It's time to talk. At the G8 summit in Northern Ireland, the leader of the free world had a lot of explaining to do. Surveillance scandals, Guantanamo, drones. Suddenly, Obama's image as Mr. Can-Do could do with some tweaking. And despite all their doubts, Europeans are genuinely excited about Obama's visit. But there's also a real fear that the transatlantic love affair has become very platonic. This was Obama, the candidate, back in 2008, promising in Berlin that Washington's first foreign love will always be European. Well, this month, the long reach of history from JFK to the Berlin airlift will demand a renewal of those vows. Well, Europe remains the least of Obama's worries. The rest of the world is demanding his attention and demanding U.S. foreign policy include action, not just words. Consider the trouble spots that Secretary of State John Kerry is tending to nonstop. Israel and the Palestinians, still no peace. Iran and the U.S. still not talking. And is Obama's red line in Syria real? Well, I've invited three people today to talk, argue, and kind of pry apart and scratch at the image of Obama's presidency as it stands today and what his visit here in Berlin will mean for the world. And my first guest, she is living the transatlantic life. She knows the workings of Washington, and she is now a Berliner. I'm happy to welcome to the show Suda David Wipp. She's with the German Marshall Fund. Suda, it's good to have you on the show today. My second guest is Jakob Schrott. He is president of the Young Transatlantic Initiative. That is a nonprofit group dedicated to strengthening ties between Germany and the U.S. So he's well positioned to sit beside you, Suda. And my third guest is Josef Janning, a fellow at the German Society for Foreign Relations. Many would say that is the leading foreign policy think tank here in Germany. Josef, it's good to have you on the show. Let's start with all of you with this premise. Obama is coming to Berlin as a president who has failed us. Can we say that, or can we say that the world back in 2008 set him up to fail? What do you say, Suda?
I think that failed is too strong of a word. I think there is disappointment on this side of the Atlantic when it comes to Obama's policies. Just subjects such as Guantanamo, climate change, those were things that he had mentioned that he'd wanted to tackle during his first term, and it just didn't happen because of gridlock in the United States. And most Europeans, I think, are disappointed, but failure is too strong of a word.
Okay, failure is too strong a word, but I think if we looked at any group that is most disappointed, Jakob, that would be Europe's young people, Germany's young people. I mean, they almost, they treated Obama like a rock star in 2008.
Well, I would make a difference between the opinion of young people and people in Europe, especially with regard to the president and to the United States as a whole. So the president is still enjoying overwhelming approving rates here in Germany. We have 85% of young people who approve the current job of the president. But if it comes to topics like Guantanamo, like drone strikes, Germans are very, very skeptical, and actually we have not recovered yet from the post-Iraq war time, and the German attitude is still very skeptical with regard to the United States.
Joseph, what do you say? Is Obama almost a victim of all this goodwill that was given to him back in 2008?
Yeah, sure. I remember the time when, after his election, when he was president-elect but not in office, and everybody was discussing, is it at all possible that he could deliver on the expectations? And many people already then said, no, it's impossible. As soon as he's president, he will face all the constraints, all the difficulties of this job. And then it is simply not possible to carry on this sort of charismatic can-do message into an office that already has to deal with Congress, has to deal with the outside world. That's and right. All that.
I mean, and true, it's hard to go from being a cheerleader to being a player on the team. We also have to remember, too, that time has changed the world. The world in 2013 looks very different from the world in 2008 when Barack Obama was catapulted to the office of the President of the United States. The most powerful man in the world possessed the most powerful ammunition every elected leader dreams of, the goodwill of most people. Well, the world in 2008 could not get enough of Barack Obama. We saw that, of course, here in Berlin. The hopes surrounding him were so high that a reality check tending towards the negative was pre-programmed. The latest Gallup poll, I've got the numbers here, shows that 47% of Americans approve of Obama's job, 45% do not. At home and abroad, Barack Obama is now criticized almost as much as he is celebrated.
On Monday, U.S. President Barack Obama spoke to Northern Ireland youth about progress through peace.
Fill me with hope. An
The
optimistic
charismatic president, first elected in 2008 with promises of change, is now coming under fire on a number of issues. Obama has not followed through on his promise to shut the doors of the prison in Guantanamo Bay. The detention facility has badly damaged America's reputation as a defender of human rights. The Nobel Peace Prize winner has also drawn criticism for his drone war. Activists say over 3,000 innocent civilians have been killed in drone strikes against suspected terrorists.
When you see everything.
And Edward Snowden's leaked revelations about the NSA electronic surveillance program has alienated even the most ardent former Obama supporters. On social media, Barack Obama has gone from "yes, we can" to "yes, we scan."
Yeah, I mean, we chuckle about that, but it's quite an indictment. He's had one term, he's in his second now, and suddenly everyone's talking about him being part of the establishment. He's actually having to say in public that he's not like Dick Cheney. Sudette, what in the world has happened?
Yeah, I think, people on the left, it's not just the half of America that didn't want Obama in office that's disappointed with the way America's going. I think many people on the left were also hoping that Obama could change things. But, we do, just to go quickly back to your question about failure, there are many things we forget. He did enact a new health care policy for the United States. He did go after Osama bin Laden and get him. But yes, I think people are disappointed with this latest scandal, with the leaks that have been happening and the intrusion on privacy in the United States and abroad. And I think it is worrisome for people on both sides of the political spectrum.
But what is it, though, about his presidency right now? Why is the Teflon, why has that been removed? The first 4 years, a lot of people said that he could do no wrong. That's not the case now. How is that possible?
Because the time he can blame his predecessor, George W. Bush, is over. Now the people are thinking about what have you done in the last 4 years, and now it's up to him to show his record. And despite the healthcare reform and Osama bin Laden, there is actually not much he can present to the American public. From immigration reform to background checks, everything failed. Foreign policy is a catastrophe so far in the Obama presidency. There is no grand strategy for the Arab uprising.
But is that true? Wasn't one of the first things that Obama did he went to Cairo and he gave this speech. He wanted reconciliation with the Arab world.
At the same time he gave the speech in Cairo, he cut all the money for North African state, for civil society. And then when the people really rised against dictators and against authoritarian rule, the United States was actually not supporting the protesters in the way he said in the Cairo speech.
Obama didn't cut the money.
Joseph, can we say that? Has he dropped the ball here, or has Congress? He's the president, he's not the king.
On that, Congress actually was to take the blame on this. Obama is to take the blame for raising expectations extremely high among especially the young urban Arab population, about a new approach to this, about somebody who would find a way between the surge of Islamic identity, which also the young people in the cities feel, in their claim to build a sort of a modern, effective, efficient, opportunity-granting sort of political and economic environment. He was the man to do it.
Yeah,
but he disappointed them because he didn't deliver on
Well,
this.
he has always stayed on message. Yes, we can, or we are all in this together. He is a president who believes in a social contract, and he's always been on message. Can we hold him responsible for how the world receives the message? I mean, that's the point, right? He's told us what he wants. His vision is clear, isn't it?
Right, but I also think, Brent, back to your question about the White House press corps, too, I think has also lost a little bit of the love affair with President Obama. I think during the first administration, it was very hesitant, wanted to give him a chance, but journalists now feel that the Obama White House has also been very secretive, not very communicative, taking the press for granted. And I think they're coming out a little harder and actually questioning what this administration has achieved.
I mean, there is a lot of secrecy in this White House that people are shocked about. And should we be so shocked?
Well, I think we're gradually waking up to a new world, and I think Obama is also waking up to this. You know, he's the first president who really has engaged in drone strikes, which is an entirely new type of war.
Right.
It's people sitting somewhere in the bunkers in the U.S. Operating this. He is the first president who has the technological ability to actually screen the communication of not only most Americans, but most of the world. And, he's not used to it. He didn't grow up with this. He doesn't have an idea how this all relates to his rather civil liberty approach that he takes. After all, this is his training. He's a constitutional lawyer, so he should be deeply concerned, but he has no response yet. How are we dealing with these technological possibilities?
He does believe, though, in the system of checks and balances and oversight. I mean, that's why he has said public. He's said, he's an attorney. He understands American law, and he has come out and said he believes that the oversight system will work. He doesn't. He thinks it's a benevolent system that we're talking about. We're talking about surveillance, but is anyone believing that?
I think he does, but it's about turning words into deeds, and I think this is also what Josef Janning said. So on the one hand, you can announce in Cairo or in Prague Global Zero, but the question is what you actually do afterwards. So giving speech and presenting the message is the one thing, but turning words into deeds is a different thing. And so the president, of course, now has the strategy to go out to the public and to announce his policy because he wants to pressure Congress. I think it's the right thing to do, but still, it's a little bit strange that the liberal constitution professor from Harvard is actually engaging in drone strikes, which still have some question with regard to international law in the way George W. Bush has never done.
And I mean, I do, I think your point's well taken, Joseph. I mean, he is going into territory that no other president has had to deal with. And maybe they're making it up as they go along. And there are people, and I want to get back to this point about you saying he says one thing but doesn't follow through. There are a lot of people in Washington now talking about Obama being a president of style and not a president of substance. When I read that and I think of what we were saying in 2008, I mean, it's like somebody, it must have been drunk in 2008. I mean, how is that possible, Sudha, that they think that the man has no substance?
I don't think that's entirely true. I think every politician likes to play with imagery and rhetoric. But of course the man has substance. Otherwise he wouldn't be where he is today. There is no way he could have gone through that grueling process of going through a primary with Hillary Clinton, becoming the Democratic nominee, and then winning in 2008. The man has substance, but he also has many domestic challenges. We mentioned checks and balances. He has to work with Congress. There are things he'd like to do, but America is really split down the middle. It's a 50-50%, or 50-50. And going back to this question of drones, it's going to, we can look back maybe in 10 years and say if this was a good policy or not, but a slight majority of Americans actually don't have a problem with the drone policy and when it comes to combating terrorism.
The drone dialogue actually is taking place here in Europe. The Europeans get much more upset about drones, about surveillance, than the Americans. I mean, you fly to the States and people, they look at you and they say, what's the big deal?
Because it happens elsewhere.
It happens elsewhere. Well, they know their phones and their emails are being checked too, but But they say it doesn't bother them.
Yeah. There's a certain irony in this with Obama. I think that man has a lot of substance. Actually, has a lot of conviction, probably more substance and more conviction than his predecessor. But he's actually weak on the point where people thought he is so strong. Facing all the difficulties that Sudha was mentioning. Now, a communicator, a charismatic person appealing to a broad public like Obama, he should be working hard to find a way how to communicate his message his message of what is needed in welfare, on welfare issues, on domestic policy, on economic recovery, on jobs, on education, to an electorate that is skeptical. You know, after all, this is what brought him into office, his enormous communication skills. But on formulating a message of substance, he's rather weak. He would probably prefer a position to kind of live out all of his substance in the White House with Congress applauding to it. But facing this deadlock in Congress and also in the country, he seems unsure on how to overcome this.
Well, he's trying to convince people that he's right.
Yeah, but he insists on his position rather than trying to win people over.
So you're saying he needs, it's amazing, but I think what you're saying is Obama needs a little bit of Ronald Reagan in
Maybe.
Yeah?
Maybe. In all his simplicity, Reagan was a very effective communicator.
Right.
He was more effective as president than he was as candidate.
But you know, there's an old adage in politics. Mario Cuomo said, you campaign in poetry, but you govern in prose, and I think that's something that Obama struggles with. Like, I agree with you, he's a much better campaigner than he is when it comes to actually governing in office.
And even if you go outside to the public and you struggle for public opinion, for example, if you take the example of background checks, there's an overwhelming majority in America, 80% for better background checks when it comes to guns. But still, the United States Senate is, of course, not voting in favor of it. So public opinion is extremely important. I totally agree. He has to get out Washington, D.C. He has to get to Heartland America. He has to struggle for opinions. But at the end of the day, the United States Senate and the House of Representatives are going to make a decision.
So maybe that's why he's coming to Berlin. Let me throw that out there. You know, other presidents have done that. JFK did it. Reagan did it. Bill Clinton did it. Is Obama coming to Berlin to set the record straight and to let us know what kind of world he is leading us into?
I think there's a big difference between this visit and previous visits by previous presidents. When President Kennedy came, his message in Berlin was also a message sent at home. Now, with Obama coming here, in the current American political situation, it is not very relevant. Now, here, in this situation, Obama comes to Europe to deliver a message to Europe. That is basically a message to kind of pick up a little bit the pieces, get some momentum again, and win some more confidence in Europe, and have a reflection of that represented somehow in the American media.
I want to pick up on that, too, Joseph. The visit of Obama to Berlin this week is part of a long narrative between the U.S. and Europe that has its focal point, as we said, right here in Berlin. Just think of the Berlin airlift, think of the Berlin Wall. You cannot tell a transatlantic story without including Berlin in it. U.S. presidents, as we said, they've always recognized that. Ronald Reagan came here in 1987 using this city to transmit the message that the world had had enough of the Iron Curtain. And it was 50 years ago this month when JFK came to Berlin, offering a personal pledge to everyone in Berlin that the U.S. would not allow them to become casualties of the Cold War.
Ich bin ein Berliner.
John F. Kennedy's immortal words symbolize the special post-World War II relationship between Germany and the U.S. Berlin's geopolitical importance became even clearer during the Cold War. When the Soviets launched the Berlin blockade, the U.S. and its allies made the unprecedented move of airlifting supplies into the city. When in 2008, the then presidential candidate Barack Obama took his campaign to Berlin, this was seen as a clear nod to the enduring transatlantic partnership.
This city.
But now, with the U.S. turning its focus towards Asia, many in Europe wonder if the U.S. still values its traditional partners.
And that is the fear going through Europe, isn't it? That the United States, with Obama, is turning its back and looking towards Asia. Europe is done. We've taken care of Europe. And isn't that the fear here? What do you say?
In a way, it is. But I don't know if fear is so much the word. I think it is a bit of a disappointment of not being in the limelight of U.S. foreign policy any longer, because it has been very convenient. has been very reassuring, very comfortable for the Europeans to know that their primary concerns at the same time were concerns of any American president. And now Europeans must face a situation where the Americans simply follow the priority of their interests. And that means that indeed Europe is not in danger. Europe is not threatened currently by anyone. And Europe should and has to be able to take care of its own interests. And that is something that the Europeans are a little bit uneasy with because they haven't found a way to do this.
Yeah, and that means we're speaking different languages now. I mean, when we're talking about foreign policy. And it hasn't been that way for a long time.
But one of the greatest problems is that we almost exclusively focus on history and transatlantic relations. So usually we talk about the Berlin airlift, about JFK in Berlin, Reagan in Berlin, Bush Sr. and his effort for German reunification. But we do not discuss how should the transatlantic relations should look like in 3 or 4 decades. We are captured in history. And so we have a project now, which is the Transatlantic Free Trade Agreement, but there is no common ground on major foreign policy issues, from climate change to migration to Arab uprising. There is no real common ground.
This trade deal, though, is huge. I mean, it's going to be the biggest free trade zone in the world.
Absolutely.
And there are a lot of people who read into it as the Americans and the Europeans are working together to create a power that can deal with China.
Absolutely. So Europe remains relevant. I think the pivot to Asia is a little bit exaggerated here in Europe. I think the Europeans are much more afraid about this pivot to Asia than the United States, actually. But if we, for example, look at the polls on the ground in the United States, more than 2/3 of young Americans say that Southeast Asia is going to be the most relevant partner for the U.S. in the future, while the older generations say, of course, it's Europe. So we see a major shift here.
And Congress appears to think that, too. I was talking last week with people from New York and Washington who do all types of exchange programs with students and with young professionals. Congress is planning to cut a lot of these subsidies. They don't see a need anymore for that. And it's kind of crazy, right? Because if you didn't have those programs, people like Suda, for example, or people like me, we wouldn't even exist. So the bridge building that has been going on, some people say it's being taken for granted. I mean, Suda, you know how it is in Washington. They think Europe is one of those expenses, we can do away with.
That's right. I mean, I think also we should probably say, the new word is not pivot, it's rebalancing. Right. I think the United States wants to reassure its partners in Europe that they are still indispensable and are, the premier partners when it comes to setting a trade agenda, when it comes to common values. And Asia is also important. I mean, President Obama mentioned in his State of the Union address not just the TTIP, the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. Mm-hmm. He also mentioned TPP. So, I mean, they're really straddling both the Pacific and the Atlantic, and rightly so, because in this age where prosperity is not what it used to be maybe in the 90s, the United States needs to look for growth everywhere, not just in Europe.
But Jakob has a good point, though. We struggle today to find common ground on a lot of things. Environmental policy is an example. The death penalty is an example. Gun control, some people would say, is an example. Isn't there an argument to be made that in the 21st century, America is much further away than it was in the 20th century?
Well, these issues have been around. The gun issue, the death penalty issue, the differences in our preferences have been around for quite some time. And still, trade across the Atlantic is, $3 billion a day, right. $3 billion a day, which is a mature relationship. And I think insofar as this is beneficial to both sides, and it is, both sides will look at each other, will focus on each other. But on the other hand, I mean, you have to take the view from the White House or from the Pentagon or from the economic actors, the business actors in the United States. There's the mature market on the one end, pretty secure, pretty stable, not delivering all the time, but okay. And there's enormous growth potential in East Asia. There is the hub of global controversy now is over East Asia. Mm-hmm. The region is the world's center of arms imports. Nobody buys more arms, also from Europeans and Americans, than actors in East Asia. Any incoming president, when he's or she's briefed, will learn that the principal challenger of the United States on the global stage is not Europe, is not Russia, it's China. And, you know, the Americans look at things many times the way first things first.
Yeah, but solidarity is no longer a given. I mean, let's look at what's going on in Syria right now. You know, the U.S., you know, many would say that Obama is still not sure about what he wants to do. He and the U.K. appear to be on the same page, but then you've got France and Germany on another. How do you find common ground? And we had a similar situation in Libya, where the Germans, they abstained. You did not have that unconditional support.
You know, I think President Obama is also coming to Berlin because he really recognizes Germany as a great power. I mean, and that Germany shouldn't feel shy about this sort of title.
And I think, Suda, I'm going to have to call you on that one.
Okay.
Okay. Obama has been in office now 4.5 years, and he has made 8 trips to Europe since he became president. This is the first time he's come to Germany. Germany is the most important economy in Europe. I mean,
right,
he's really, his learning curve here seems to be
exactly, but now I think
really
he sees Europe falling apart and saying, we need Europe, and the country that's going to be able to pull Europe together is Germany. You know, and not just economic prowess, but I think he also wants to see Germany starting to share the burden when it comes to creating a stable world.
So I'm not sure about this. So when President Obama was still senator and he was the chairman of the subcommittee on Europe, he was not visiting Germany once during his time. He had not had a single hearing about Europe as the president of the subcommittee on Europe. And so right now, so that's again, he's going to have a speech in front of the Brandenburger Gate, of course, but at the end of the day, what is about the precise policy? What is the common ground on climate change, on migration, on Syria, Iran, Libya? If it comes to real hard policy, we still struggle to find common ground. And so once more, turning words into deeds, which is not only to blame President Obama. We see the German position on Libya, for example, which I totally disagreed with, the German reluctance to have a fair share in many grounds.
But, I mean, but the point is, you do have these divisions now that come up again and again. And you can't bank on support like you could 20 years ago.
He did also mention Germany twice in State of the Union speeches, and I think it's hard to find common ground when the partners within Europe are having a hard time finding common ground.
Actually, I think if you'd ask the White House staff, they would probably say Obama is quite frustrated about Berlin because he has made so many advances to Chancellor Merkel.
Absolutely.
This Freedom Medal thing,
exactly.
State dinner thing, it was not just because she's such a nice person. It was because Obama was trying to communicate to Berlin, we think you're important. We think you're privileged.
But then we're right back to what you said earlier, is that he wants us to get the message, but he can't deliver it. I mean, is that what's happening here?
What he intended to win a partner that would say, yes, we're willing to go out of our usual ways. We're willing to go along with you on things in the world that are troubling us together. Merkel did not respond along these lines. She took up the kind offers, but she didn't deliver. And Obama, frankly, had no idea how he could win her. Very much unlike Cameron or Sarkozy in his time.
Well, he can't do like George Bush did and try to give her a shoulder massage, right? So, I mean, what's he going to do? Yeah. You know?
He gives her a Medal of Freedom.
He gives her a Medal of Freedom, right.
His problem is how to deal with a country that doesn't want to move, that doesn't want to take risks, that doesn't want to go out of its usual way.
How to deal with the Germans is what you're talking about. Yeah.
I mean,
that's a completely different show. But I mean, it is a good point. Could we make the argument that maybe Angela Merkel hasn't heard the message as clearly as Obama would like because she is so busy dealing with Europe's problems, and for the first time in a long time, the plate is full. And there isn't a lot of extra capacity for dealing with another superpower.
I think she's chosen to overhear some of the undertones in his message. Now, also remember, when she was struggling with the euro crisis in 2009, 2010, there was a lot of ready advice from Washington on what they should do.
Yes.
And most of that advice was spend more, consume more, go down that way. And she was absolutely convinced that she would not hold this. She would not hold such a policy in the light of the skeptic German public, in light of the situation around Europe. So she thought the advice from Washington was actually rather counterproductive in terms of her own strategy. Right. So her best bet to react to Obama's foreign policy moves was to simply not to listen too closely.
That's true. I mean, we reported on this many times. Timothy Geithner would come over and he would tell Wolfgang Schäuble, the finance minister, you guys need to do this. You need to spend money. You need to lower your taxes. And the way he would say it, too, was very, it wasn't the nicest way. But they heard that over and over again. But they never changed their policy.
But let's get back to transatlantic relations for a second. I think transatlantic relations, what is the heart of it? It is not only a nice phrase, but it is what the people on both sides of the Atlantic Ocean think of each another. So transatlantic relations are too important to only focus on a Rose Garden event for Chancellor Merkel or whether diplomats get along with another at the Munich Security Conference. It's about what stereotypes we have in mind if we think of another, what Germans think about Americans and Americans are Germans. Right. And here we have a huge decline in public opinion, especially in Germany about the United States. And this is what bothers me the most with the future of this relation.
Well, couldn't you say, though, that the fact that Germany, is allowing Obama to speak in front of the Brandenburg Gate, that in itself is a sign of tremendous affection for Obama? I mean, Merkel could have blocked that. The fact that they're allowing him to come back and to stand in front of the Brandenburg Gate, isn't that a sign of? Isn't that a renewal of the vows, of alignment and friendship and trust and common values?
I don't see how she could have blocked that.
Exactly. I think she actually invited him, if I'm not mistaken.
So you're not telling
to make up for last time, for 2008.
Exactly. Right. He had to earn it, is what she's saying. All right. Let's move on and talk a little bit more about foreign policy. President Obama is spending part of the week here in Germany and will then head to Tanzania, South Africa, and Senegal. America's reach, some would say, as the only remaining superpower, continues to be huge, but most people today talk about the rising powers in Asia and the BRIC economies, and in the same breath, they usually speak of the decline of American influence around the globe. Now, this places the president, and we'll talk about this in a second, in a very difficult and delicate position. On the one hand, he is charged with preparing America for a 21st century in which power is multipolar. At the same time, people continue to knock at his door, demanding he intervene in conflicts far away. They say the U.S. remains the only country that has both the might and the right.
Just months into his second term, Obama is facing a number of foreign policy challenges. One of his first moves was to send Secretary of State John Kerry on a whirlwind tour of many of the world's troubled spots. In Israel, Kerry embarked on intense days of shuttle diplomacy, but so far has little to show for it. US-Iranian relations are as bad as ever. With a new Iranian president in office, the US might try to engage diplomatically with Tehran. Syria is another hotspot, one that Obama will be trying to avoid getting too deeply involved in. During the Arab Spring, the US was conspicuous in its absence. In Libya, Obama did get some praise at home for maneuvering his European partners into the driver's seat.
So isn't this really what is driving a wedge between Europe and the United States? It's American foreign policy. The Americans, as many would say, they still have the power to do what they want militarily. And they do that. And that's what the drone issue is about. And it's not a big issue in the States, is it, Sudha?
No, it's not. But I think, if you look deeper, maybe that's the divide in the public. But when it comes to decision makers, I think the issue is Europe. Europe is immersed in itself. It's immersed in trying to reinvigorate the European project. So it's having a hard time working with partners or working with their counterparts in Washington to flesh out a U.S. foreign policy or a transatlantic foreign policy, because Europe is also trying to solve problems at home right now with the Euro crisis.
I mean, so is it building some castle in the sky to think that there could be some common American-European foreign policy dealing with what's happening in Asia or dealing with the rise of even of South America. Is that plausible?
I don't really see this. I don't think that any U.S. administration would be particularly keen to see Europe conducting policy in South America or obliging the United States to consult with Europe on South America. On Asia, the story would be somewhat different.
Yeah, because we have this free trade agreement, which is just as much about military power as it is economic power, if you read between the lines.
On Asia, you have an explicit American interest to be able to set the terms of trade when it comes to business. As China enters the world economy as a powerful actor, the U.S. wants to use the momentum that there is, and that is mostly in the U.S.-European economic relationship and its impact on the global economy, to somehow adapt the rules so that China is not entering into a major rewriting business, but rather is nudged to accept these rules.
I mean, China's one thing. What about Israel and the Palestinians? You hear all the time here in Europe, the Americans are the reason why we don't have a peace agreement. If Obama wanted to, he could exert pressure, and Israel and the Palestinians would sit down and talk.
Well, first, it's true that America likes to solve those problems on their own. So they don't want to have Brussels or anyone else to make the decision for themselves. On the other hand, for example, if we see the Chicago summit of NATO, we have a clear roadmap of smart defense, of burden sharing, but we make no progress here, which is largely because of the Europeans, because of our cuts in our defense budgets here. But with regard to Israel and Palestine, so the question is, what is the heart, what is the bottom of the problem in the Middle East? And so Obama considered Israel-Palestine as the main problem to solve the surrounding problems as well. But it's such a frustrating topic, and John Kerry's not going to solve it, President Obama's not going to solve it. There is no momentum
We hear it, though. If you go anywhere in the Arab world, if you talk to people who want reform, they tell you that successful reform is not going to come. Peace is not going to come until the Israeli-Palestinian problem is solved. If everyone's telling us that, why isn't Obama using the power he has to make peace?
It's not over yet. He still has time left in his second term. And if you look in the past, American presidents like Clinton spent time in the Middle East toward the end because they don't want to exhaust power, resources on such an intractable problem like the Middle East, when there are a lot of things that he has to take care of at home first. But Obama, like we talked about building, he's about style, about image, he's going to want to worry about his legacy.
Okay, he's a legacy.
And I think the Middle East may be, because he started out going to Cairo at the beginning, so maybe by the end at the beginning, so he'll come full circle perhaps at the end.
Well, he should have engaged a bit more intensively by now then, if that was the aim, because he should remember how Bill Clinton ended, with the best of intentions, with a good record. Think of the North Ireland breakthrough that he established. He started in his second administration to launch a major breakthrough, and he came very close to it towards the end of his second term, but he didn't have the time to twist the arms of the Palestinians for long enough in order to have them accept it.
That's what I've been trying to get you all to say. What is the significance of the speech in front of the Brandenburg Gate this week? Are we going to see Obama beginning to build his legacy this week?
Not in Europe. That's not the appropriate place, I think. I think the speech will be about the historical ties which bound us. It will be a reassurance. We will rebuilding, saying that the United States is not going to forget Germany and Europe as a whole, but it's not going to be a legacy building speech.
But can it be a forum for him to say, look at what we have in common? This should be an example, for what's happening in Turkey. The Turks can look to Europe and to the U.S. as role models that peace can work. I mean, this is an excellent opportunity.
I think he's going to say Germany is an example
of
peaceful transition.
Yeah.
Germany should play a role in world affairs and showing people how they how they overcame division and came together in a bloodless revolution.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's plausible, isn't it? He's going to sing the praises of the success of peace, which is right here in Berlin.
Right. I think he will try to be entirely positive in his communication.
Absolutely.
So he will not speak about,
Differences
you
or
know,
anything,
the
no.
U.S. turning away or Europe not delivering.
Yeah.
He will rather speak about the high expectations.
Absolutely.
You know, the enormous record of Europe and the possibilities that there are if only we look at the world together and, you know, identify the challenges and act upon them. This is the sort of message that is to be expected.
You know,
from him.
what we haven't touched on a lot, and you know, I want to before we run out of time, is the war on terror. And are America and Europe on the same page with that? If we say we're not on the same page when it comes to drones, where are we on the same page? Suda, you?
It's a good question, and I think also just we're talking about history here, just because of the, historical connotations here in Berlin, where there was a Stasi in half of the city, or maybe all over the city, doing surveillance on people, private citizens. I think this is going to be a stumbling block, but it can be overcome. You know, this is definitely overshadowing the visit, but terrorism hasn't happened here in Germany.
We're running out of time. I've got 2 questions. I need yes or no answers from all of you. The speech in Berlin this week, will it be a historic policy-making speech from Obama? Yes or no?
No.
Suda?
No.
No.
Okay. President Obama himself, will he go down in history as being one of the most important U.S. presidents?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. The yeses have it. All right. The positive voices went out on agenda almost every week we do that. That is going to wrap up my agenda this week. Don't forget you can watch the show again on our website and on YouTube. And don't be shy. Tell us what you think about the show. Our inbox is always open. You see the address there on the screen. I'm Brent Goff in Berlin, as I am every week. Join me next time when I set the agenda.